Here's a fun fact. The drunkest place in America closes liquor stores at 9 p.m.
It's all lies. Everyone knows Milwaukee liquor stores close at 9 and not 12. Wait, 9? 9 p.m.? Yeah, I know.
Even the fucking Lake Michigan monster knows that that's ridiculous. If you're one of the 3 people who understand this bit, I appreciate you. Wisconsin, the drunkest place maybe on the planet, doesn't let you buy a beer if it's 9:01 p.m. And I've always wanted to know why. The prevailing theory...
I honestly think the idea is that people go out to bars and restaurants, spend money, help support the local economy. I think that's where the head's at anyways.
And I've heard this more times than I can actually count, but I've always wondered if it's actually true. I mean, after all, aren't liquor stores part of the local economy? So I've gone down a rabbit hole to figure out why the fuck I can't buy a beer past 9 p.m. Hi, my name is Nathan Denzine, and I'm a reporter with like 7 awards, so you can trust me. Ozzy's gonna hang out with the beer for a minute. Before we jump in, I'm gonna need to give you guys an introduction to the Tavern League of Wisconsin, because they're really the reason that most people think that the liquor stores close for, people to go out to the bars. So the Tavern League of Wisconsin is a state lobbying group. Of the about 10,000 bars that are in Wisconsin, about 5,000 of them are members of the Tavern League. Really, the Tavern League doesn't have a lot of money. They really don't do a whole lot of lobbying. There's this perception that the Tavern League is like super hardcore because they pretty often get what they want. Because as Captain Seafield mentioned earlier,
I honestly think the idea is that people go out to bars.
Which is what most people assume. The Tavern League wanted the liquor stores to close at 9 p.m. so that people would go out to bars and restaurants and spend their money there instead. So now that that's out of the way, let's look at some of the history of liquor laws in Wisconsin to figure out why this came to pass. In 1848, Wisconsin incorporated as a state with a population of mostly Yankee immigrants from the East Coast and a whole lot more immigrants from Germany. And the German immigrants tended to indulge themselves quite a bit, and the more religious-minded Yankees were not a huge fan of that behavior. So they made a number of laws that were nicknamed blue laws that tried to change the way that the immigrants behaved. They associated a fee with any costs incurred for supporting an alcoholic. They outlawed selling alcohol on Sundays. And in 1872, they took the bold step to stop minors from drinking, which I guess was happening before then. 2 beers, please. How old are you? Okay. Yay! The state laws then waxed and waned in Wisconsin over the years, but in 1920 prohibition was instituted and the sale of alcohol nationwide was outlawed. Fast forward to 1929 and a Wisconsin senator named John Blaine sponsored the 21st Amendment, which ended prohibition. Wisconsin, with its people desperate to return to alcoholism, was the second state to ratify the change. Coming out of prohibition, Wisconsin was left with a set of laws that allowed 18-year-olds to drink beer, but not wine or liquor, and 21-year-olds to be able to drink anything that they wanted. Fast forward again to 1971 when the federal voting age was lowered to 18. Wisconsin decided then that they would also lower their drinking age to 18. Legislation was pretty light around alcohol for the next 11 years, but in 1981, when the next major bill was passed, it instituted that 9 p.m. liquor store closing law. And from here on out, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to be calling that law a carryout ban because you're carrying alcohol out of a store. So what happened between 1970 and 1981, and why was the ban instituted in the first place? To set the stage for this, let me ask you a question. If you were in high school and you could legally buy alcohol, would you have made good decisions? I couldn't legally buy alcohol and I still made bad decisions. Tragically and unfortunately, but predictably, teenage drunk driving deaths hit an all-time high in 1978 on American roads. That year, more than 10,000 teenagers lost their lives in fatal drunk driving accidents on American roads. Wisconsin's infrastructure forces you to drive, and teenagers are notoriously bad decision makers. When I looked through old newspaper articles, the first mentions of a carryout ban that I could find were from 1978. That year, Chicago had published that they had banned carryout sales to anybody younger than 21 years old past 9 p.m., and they had seen sales just plummet. In 1980, Wisconsin Governor Lee Dreyfus praised a legislative committee's recommendation to institute the 9 p.m. carryout ban. He was quoted as saying, "It's that combination of alcohol and the highways that's causing the problem." During this time, a Milwaukee representative was also quoted by saying that these bills were specifically targeted to 18 and 20-year-olds who typically would buy their alcohol past 9 p.m. spontaneously late at night. Then, the first mentions that I could find of Wisconsin communities instituting this 9 p.m. carryout ban was in 1981. Starting in February of that year, the town of Monona instituted their own carryout ban to quote-unquote combat alcohol abuse. Later that year, Dane County, which is the second largest county in Wisconsin, recommended that all of the townships in their borders institute a carryout ban. And in November, there were 2 different Wisconsin towns who proposed their own carryout bans, noting that they were trying to, quote, combat juvenile drinking. 2 beers, please. How old are you? That ban was approved a few months later. And in 1981, the state made it official. No retailers could sell wine or liquor past 9 p.m., though beer could still be sold till midnight, but they allowed municipalities to restrict that sale further so that they could also put a 9 p.m. cutoff for beer if they wanted to. Most towns in Wisconsin took them up on that offer, and so that's pretty much where we stand today. So if we take all of this into consideration, I think it's pretty safe to say that this carryout ban was instituted because teenagers were dying in drunk driving accidents, and not because the Tavern League of Wisconsin had some hidden secret agenda. If you look at the numbers, fatal crashes were like 70% higher back then than they are today. But like I said earlier, if the Tavern League didn't have some hand in this, where were they during this time? Time for a new one. Oh, it's nice and cold. Despite the constant rumor that bar owners wanted this law to be changed, their quotes from the time actually go to show that they were not very happy at all. One of the towns that we were talking about earlier, Sauk City, in 1981, when they were proposing their carryout ban, the paper actually noted that a previous iteration of this rule had been shot down because there were so many angry tavern owners at the local town meeting. One official quoted in the story even said that they didn't feel that the taverns were being given a fair shake. Now, this is in part because bars were still actually allowed to serve carry-out drinks when liquor stores weren't after this law was passed, so people could still go into these bars, order a beer, or, a 6-pack or something, and then take it out and drink it, anywhere but in a public place, basically. In Reedsburg, there was another very unhappy tavern owner when a carry-out ban was proposed. This guy said, quote, "They're knocking off our 9 to 12 business. It's money out of our pockets." Then, jumping back to Sauk City in 1984 when they were voting to make their carryout ban permanent, one tavern owner was quoted as saying, "The community never asked the tavern owners how much business they lost." So, let it be clear that bar owners actually love underage drinking. 2 beers, please. How old are you? Nice. Yay! There was one quote of a tavern owner from Madison who said that the carryout law would actually probably help his business, but that was basically the only mention that I could find of a tavern owner saying, "Hey, this might actually help us." This list is not comprehensive by any means, but I think it's pretty safe to say that most tavern owners were not happy with these laws. Which leads me to... From what I can tell, the long-running rumor that...
I honestly think the idea is that people go out to bars.
It's just not really true. The real reason the ban was enacted was because teenagers were drinking and driving at a really high rate, and this was the easiest way for everybody to take away their access to alcohol. And it should be mentioned that these carryout bans came in tandem with a push to raise the drinking age universally to 21. The Tavern League was not a fan of that either. The only reason that Wisconsin ever raised the drinking age was because the federal government threatened our highway funding. But since the drinking age was raised, 5 years after the carryout bans were introduced, no municipalities really changed their laws.
Some of these ordinances, I tell you. Some of these ordinances, indeed.
Plus, the ban seemed to actually work. In 1985, teenage drunk driving accidents in America were already 30% lower than they were at their peak in 1978. And that number still is trending lower today. So, without much of a reason to reverse course, the 9 p.m. ban stood. But because nobody likes the Tavern League, they've shouldered the blame to this day. If you really want somebody to blame, you should blame teenagers in the 1970s.